I'm already planning all of my builds that I'm going to be uploading for Black Myth Wukong, and I'm happy to say that despite the nature of the skill system that I have right here and how the game flows, you still have separate individual builds that actually do different things, and I have been using quite several of them. I still haven't explored all of the possibilities that I want to explore, but I do have a grasp of what is it that's best, what is it that's not as good as some of the other ones. And there's a particular build that I feel that it outclasses like every single other thing that you have out there, and it's essentially, like always with these types of games, the usage of magic and abusing magic. This specific build that I have for you right here, there are some things that you can tweak and toy around here and there, but the idea is very simple. It revolves around CCing the enemy and dealing as much damage as possible when the enemy is CC'd, when the enemy can't do anything to you, and ideally not allowing for the enemy to do any damage at all. Sometimes, in some instances, all throughout the entirety of the fight, the enemy is not going to do anything at all to you. Some of the times, because of the nature of some boss fights, you're going to have to rely on cooldowns, but more often than not, when you rely on cooldowns, the health bar of the enemy is usually going to be like on 50% by the time that they deal damage to you. Now, one thing to have in mind is that this is mostly like a magic-based build, and have that in mind because there's a lot of, well, not a lot of bosses, like there's like 100 bosses in this game. There's a couple of them, especially the boss at the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, that they, at some point that you reach the boss fight, like the third phase of the bosses, they don't allow you to use magic, so that's something to have in mind as well. So like I mentioned, there is a Triforce of you CCing and knocking down the enemy and dealing damage with that. The Triforce of everything is going to be the usage of Immobilize for you to CC the enemy, and then you have to build Focus. That Focus is that's going to be the second part of the Triforce, and then the final part of the Triforce is going to deal massive damage with your staff stance. I'm using the Pillar stance right here, but just know that you can use any stance in here. So let's talk about that. The Pillar stance that I have right here, it's just the overall idea is to mix and match stuff to get the focus attack level 4. This is going to be your bread and butter. When you CC the enemy, you're going to build this bad boy as soon as possible, and that's really everything that you have to know about this tree right here. Remember that either the smash, pillar, or thrust stance are going to work perfectly fine with this build. The second part of the build is going to be Immobilize. This increases the time that the enemy is mobilized, the damage that you deal to an immobilized enemy, and the duration based on, we're going to be focusing ourselves on mana. There's this talent right here that consumes a moderate amount of additional mana to massively extend the immobilization duration. This is a key part of everything. Yes, it uses a lot of mana, but will be taking extra steps for us to have quite a lot of mana at all times for us to be able to abuse this thing right here. Now, this is extra little something. This is something that you should be doing at the end of this build. This build is going to be properly established once you reach the third act of the game. That is not to say that you cannot start using, like for example, the mysticism or the staff stances. As a matter of fact, the main focus at all times by the first chapter should be getting your pillar stance, and then the second focus should be Immobilize, and then the third focus is going to be able, I do have quite a lot of different things in here. Just have in mind that you don't actually need all of this for the build to work. This is just extra consequential little something because I have a high level, so I do want to have a little bit more of damage right here. I do want to have a little bit more mana right here. But really, in reality, the only thing that you're going to do, which is the second part of your Triforce that I mentioned, is going to be focus, spinning, and all of these three right here. This is going to be the next focus that you are going to have. So once again, it's going to be your staff stance, and then Immobilize, and then the third thing that you want to have completed is going to be this 4 right here, and then work your way through here. All of this is just extra little something that I want to have, but it's not necessarily mandatory, and if you're still leveling up, you shouldn't really worry about this thing either. One more thing that you shouldn't worry about either, but it's a nice way to build focus, is also the pluck of mana with the strand kind of tree for the talents. One thing that I like about this is that, for example, these guys can use Immobilize once you reach a certain point. And one thing that I like about this as well is that you can build quite a lot of focus with this right here. Now the spirit that you will be using, and this is also a quintessential part of this build, and as a matter of fact you're going to be switching back and forth with this thing. It is going to be the upper mana bat. I think that you get this guy on the 3rd chapter of the game, if I am not mistaken. It could probably also be on the 2nd chapter of the game. I'll try to leave a link in the description to show you where this guy is. And you have to upgrade this guy to the maximum. When you upgrade this guy, it is not only going to increase the damage, but the main thing that we're using this thing for is that when you upgrade it to the maximum, it nearly insta-freezes every single enemy in the game. If they don't get insta-frozen, then you're going to deal enough froze damage so that by a second cast, you're going to be able to freeze the enemy. The way this thing works is that, for example, it consumes chi, it consumes chi. So what essentially you're doing in here is that the cooldown for your immobilization, the spell, is going to be shared with this thing right here. However, when you immobilize something, you're also going to be using your staff to build this bad boy right there. So it's essentially always going to be building and waiting for the cooldown from one to the other, and the enemy should always be CC'd so that you can follow up with the final attack of the combo with your pillar stance. And that is essentially what's everything that you're going to be doing. I mentioned that this is very, very important because when you use this against a frozen enemy, or when you use this against an immobilized enemy, it's going to build the focus bar like a maniac, but it's also going to increase your chi like a maniac. So every time that you freeze and you immobilize something, you're also getting your cooldowns right here, and this gives you the chance and the option to finally build the focus meter to finish up with your final 4th focus attack. So that's the build as it is right there, but there's a couple of extra little somethings. These things that I'm going to mention, you don't need them. You do have to find them. If you don't have them with you, don't worry about them. The build is already established and it is going to work just fine. But for example, with our friend right here, which you can get by completing a quest line, this guy will allow you to make celestial medicine, and you should always be focusing on the Tai Yi peel, which is going to increase your maximum mana. As for your drink, the Jade Essence, this is going to give you mana as well, but yeah, it's just for sustainability. It's not like the enemy is most likely going to be that with just one cast of the Immobilize and then with one cast of the Spirit that we have. So this is an extra little something that I advise for you to use if you have it. If not, it's just the regular one for the regular healing. It's just fine. As for the curios, just anything that would increase, like for example your overall DPS, or that would increase, for example, the overall sustainability of your stamina recovery rate, or things like that. There's also curios that would increase your immobilize spell. The soaks as well, like for example this one increases the immobilize spell whenever you use a gourd. Remember that our gourd increases our mana, but this is, like I mentioned, if you don't have this guy, it's really not that important. The build is already established as it was before. As for a weapon, I do have one of the most powerful weapons in the game, and as a matter of fact the stance that I'm using specifically is because it increases the damage of this guy right here, but it's just because of that fact. You can also be using, for example, the long reach staff, which is a weapon that I have already showed you. It's links in the video description on how to get this bad boy right here. It also increases damage and it's a little bit easier to obtain than this one right here. As for the armor, you're always going to be using things depending on the situation and amount and level and location that you are. So for example, once you enter into the 4th chapter of the game, you're going to be using the golden embroiderments, which is something that you can get just by naturally playing the game. This is going to increase your chi, enhance your chi and your spirit skills usage as well. Before you get that on the chapter 3 of the game, you can be using, for example, the battle robe, which is going to increase the decoy or the duplicates that we're using as an extra little something that are not a mandatory thing to have. Just focus and prioritize things that are going to increase the mobilization or the duplicates, your shadow clones. It's just the regular things that you're using right here to improve their overall effectiveness. But in reality, the real build is established in here to work as it is. So you have your staff stance, and then you immobilize enemy. Whenever you immobilize enemies, you use your focus spinning, which is going to build your spirit, and it's also going to build your pillar stance to deal massive damage. Once the enemy is not frozen anymore in time, you use your spirit, and then you use this thing back again, and rinse and repeat back and forth, and things are just going to die just quite easily. Anyways, if you like the content, like on the video, super appreciate it. And also, you that you're a gorgeous beautiful person, you're a gorgeous beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.